Hey everyone, I'm Sarah, and I've got a story to share that many of you might find all too familiar. It's about the kind of mother-in-law troubles that seem more common than I ever imagined. Honestly, I was shocked to discover just how many people are dealing with overbearing mothers-in-law. My mother-in-law, Catherine, is no exception. From the moment I married Thomas, it became clear that Catherine had a strong sense of entitlement and a rather distorted view of reality. Despite not relying on use for her day-to-day needs, Catherine had this habit of claiming ownership over anything she touched, essentially declaring our belongings as her own. This trait of hers came from a deep-seated greed and a desire for a lavish lifestyle, which, ironically, she could never afford. For the most part, Catherine and I managed to coexist without major issues, mainly because I chose to stay silent to keep the peace. However, an incident occurred that completely shifted our dynamic. This involved a Mercedes-Benz SL I inherited from my grandfather. It meant the world to me, not just as a piece of history, but as a sentimental connection to my grandfather, who had recently passed away. Understanding Catherine's materialistic mindset, Thomas and I decided it was best to keep the car a secret from her. We knew she would see it as just another asset to liquidate. True to form, when Catherine discovered the car during a stay at our house, she was temporarily living with us due to her own home needing urgent repairs, a saga of its own. Her reaction was predictably outrageous. Upon laying eyes on the Mercedes-Benz SL, Catherine wasted no time in asserting that it should be sold, and the proceeds divided, partly to her benefit. Her argument was based on a quick internet search that valued the car at around $80,000. She couldn't grasp why I would choose to hold on to such an item when selling it could bring in a substantial sum of money. Her perspective was baffling to me. Firstly, it was none of her business what I did with my own property. Secondly, the notion that I was somehow obligated to share my inheritance with her was absurd. Catherine's expectations were not just unrealistic. They were completely out of touch with how personal possessions and family heirlooms work. This whole ordeal taught me a lot about setting boundaries and dealing with difficult family dynamics. I was at a loss about how to confront her effectively, so I let the matter slide, hoping she'd drop the subject. Unfortunately, my hope was in vain. Catherine proved to be extremely tenacious, relentlessly revisiting the idea. During a peaceful dinner, she breached the subject of selling my Mercedes-Benz SL once more, abruptly inquiring if I had reconsidered her earlier advice. My patience wearing thin, I firmly reiterated, "For the last time, Catherine, I'm not selling my car. That's simply out of the question." Catherine, undeterred and escalating the situation, argued, "Sarah, it's utterly unreasonable for you to own such an expensive car. You're not living a millionaire's lifestyle. Your Toyota suits you just fine. You should think about the family, sell the car, and share the proceeds. That way, everyone benefits." I stood my ground, explaining, "You have no say in what I do with my car, Catherine. I decide to make. I'm perfectly content with the car remaining in my garage. It holds sentimental value for me, a connection to my grandfather I always hoped to inherit. I'm not selling it, period." Trying to enlist my husband's support, Catherine turned to Thomas. "You need to convince your wife to sell the car. It's absurd for her to keep such a valuable car idle when the money could benefit us all." Catherine was banking on Thomas siding with her, knowing his historical difficulty in asserting boundaries with her. However, Thomas had been making strides in standing up for himself and our decisions as a couple. Catherine was visibly taken aback when Thomas supported me, stating, "Mom, it's her car, and it's her choice to make. The car means a lot to her emotionally. We have no right to pressure her into selling." "But Thomas, think about the amount of money at stake," Catherine protested, unable to let go of the financial aspect. Thomas calmly responded, "Even if it involves a significant sum, it's Sarah's to decide how to use it. We shouldn't meddle in her personal matters." "Mom, you're crossing a line here. We need to respect our privacy and choices." Catherine, deflated by Thomas's stance, realized her influence was waning. Despite her son's clear message, she didn't completely abandon her attempts, occasionally making offhand remarks about the car and how beneficial having $80,000 in cash could be. Her persistent comments were becoming increasingly bothersome. Ignoring Catherine's antics turned out to be a mistake I would regret deeply. She audaciously sold my Mercedes-Benz SL without my knowledge, a move I never saw coming. One morning, as I prepared to head to work, I discovered the car was missing from our garage. I intended to drive my Toyota that day, but when I opened at the garage, I was greeted by an empty space where my Mercedes-Benz SL should have been. Panic set in as I noted the garage didn't appear forcibly entered, and with Thomas already at work, in his Chevrolet Camaro, theft seemed the only explanation. I immediately called off work for the day, knowing I couldn't focus until I found my car. It was more than just a vehicle to me. It was a cherished piece of family history. In a state of near hysteria, I phoned Thomas, desperately hoping for some explanation. "Thomas, did you happen to take my Mercedes-Benz SL?" "It's missing," I managed to say, trying to hold back my panic. "What?" "No, I took my Chevrolet Camaro. Are you sure it's not there?" Thomas replied, confusion clear in his voice. "It's gone, Thomas. Vanished while I was getting ready to leave. I'm really worried," I admitted. Thomas, ever the calming presence, advised, "Sarah, try to stay calm. First thing, check our security footage. Then, call the police with whatever you find. I'm about to enter a meeting, but keep me updated, okay?" Following his advice, I rushed to review the security camera footage through our phone app, hoping for some clues. What I found left me shocked and furious. Catherine, blatantly disregarding my explicit wishes, was on the video, driving away with my Mercedes-Benz SL. After all the discussions and arguments, she had defiantly crossed a line I never imagined she would. Seething with anger, I confronted Catherine over the phone, recording the conversation for evidence. "Catherine, where are you and why did you take my car?" I demanded, struggling to contain my outrage. "Oh, calm down, Sarah. I just took it for a short spin," she replied nonchalantly. "That's unacceptable. You had no right. I need my car back immediately." "You never had my permission to use it," I insisted, my voice firm despite my rising anger. "It was just sitting in your garage, Sarah. Since you refused to sell it, I figured I might as well enjoy it." "Stop bothering me, I'll return when I'm ready," Catherine responded, her tone dismissive. Her audacity astounded me. Not only had she taken my car without permission, but she also acted as if she was entitled to do so. It was clear I had underestimated the lengths to which Catherine would go, and now I was paying the price for it. Returning home, my temper was at boiling point. The thought of calling the police on Catherine crossed my mind, fueled by sheer outrage. Yet I hesitated, reasoning that she was family after all. I figured if she brought the car back undamaged, I'd let her off with a stern warning and take measures to ensure such an audacious act never repeated itself. The idea was to avoid involving law enforcement unnecessarily, sparing them from a potentially frivolous task. However, as time ticked by without any sign of Catherine or my car, my resolve began to waver, unaware that the situation was about to deteriorate even further. When Catherine eventually strolled in, not only was my car conspicuously absent, but she also flaunted an array of shopping bags from high-end brands, clearly beyond her financial reach. My heart sank as I rushed to confront her, demanding, "Catherine, where is my Mercedes-Benz SL? What have you done?" "Oh, that old thing?" she replied with a smirk. "Consider your $80,000 car history. It's gone." Her words ignited a fury me I hadn't known possible. "Gone. What do you mean, gone?" "Catherine, clarify now because my patience is wearing thin." I pressed it, trying to keep my composure. Without a hint of guilt, Catherine boasted, "I did what you've been too stubborn to do. I sold your car." The smugness in her voice as she revealed this betrayal was almost too much to bear. My disbelief quickly morphed into seething anger. "You sold my car? How could you?" I exclaimed, struggling to remain calm. "Yes, Sarah, I sold it today. And look at all the wonderful things I've been able to buy with the money," she said, gesturing to her luxurious haul. I was dumbfounded. "Let me get this straight. You took my car, sold it, and spent the money on luxury shopping?" I needed her to spell it out, to confirm the insanity of her actions. "Exactly," she replied nonchalantly. "Why are you so shocked? I've always said that car was a waste, just sitting in your garage. Catherine, are you out of your mind? Who gave you the right to take my property and profit from it?" My voice rose despite my efforts to control it. "Oh, Sarah, don't be so dramatic. I do intend to use some of the money for the family. I've even booked us all plane tickets to Talkeetna for a nice getaway at a ski resort," she added, as if that would somehow soften the blow. Her audacity was beyond comprehension. Catherine had not only stolen my cherished Mercedes-Benz SL, but had the gall to justify her actions by splurging on herself and making extravagant plans with the proceeds. It was a clear violation of trust and respect, leaving me to grapple with the realization of her betrayal. Catherine's words felt like a slap in the face, pushing me to the edge of my patience. I've always wanted to see the world, and I'm not the only one benefiting here. Behave yourself, and maybe I'll share some of the money with you." She taunted as if her outrageous actions were somehow justifiable or even generous. The sheer audacity of her entitlement was staggering. It was hard to believe anyone could be so blatantly disrespectful, selling something that wasn't theirs to sell. Yet, with Catherine, it seemed all boundaries of decency were off the table. Despite my anger and disbelief, I tried to give her one last opportunity to rectify the situation. "Listen, Catherine," I said, my voice laced with a final warning. "You're going to take whatever transportation you have, go back to whoever bought my car, and you're going to bring it back here. This is your last chance to avoid making an irreversible mistake." Her response was as infuriating as it was dismissive. "Threatening me won't work, Sarah. The car's sold, the money partly spent. I didn't sell it just so you could snap your fingers and have it returned. So you're refusing to undo your mistake? You're actually okay with this decision?" I pressed, hoping for a glimmer of reason. Catherine scoffed. "Of course, I'm not bringing your car back. It's gone. Enjoy your Toyota." With that, she ignored my final words and retreated to her room, leaving me in a whirlwind of frustration and disbelief. It was clear that reasoning with Catherine was futile. She had crossed a line, and polite discussion wasn't going to resolve this crisis. Left with no other choice, I took the most logical next step. I called the police. Within minutes of explaining the situation, officers were at my door. I hastily gathered all necessary documentation, ownership papers for the car, and any relevant legal documents to prove my case. I led the officers inside, presenting them with both the physical proof of my ownership and the security footage showing Catherine taking my car without permission. As we reviewed the evidence, the officers decided it was time to confront Catherine directly. She came downstairs, visibly irritated at the interruption, but froze when she realized the gravity of the situation. The presence of law enforcement made it undeniably real. Her actions had serious consequences, and it was time to face them. Upon seeing the officers, Catherine immediately adopted a tone of innocent curiosity. "Good afternoon, officers. Is there a problem? Is my daughter-in-law in trouble?" One officer clarified the situation. "Ma'am, your daughter-in-law accuses you of illegally selling her car." Catherine feigned shock. "Oh, that's impossible, officers. You must be mistaken. Her car is right there in the garage. She must be misunderstanding something." The officer corrected her. "We're not referring to the Toyota. We're talking about a Mercedes-Benz SL you sold earlier today." Trying to maintain her innocence, Catherine responded, "A Mercedes-Benz SL? There's been some misunderstanding. We don't have such items in our possession." The officers, prepared with evidence, countered, "We have documentation and video proof of your actions. Plus, there's an insurance claim involved. Continuing to lie will not benefit you." Caught in her lie, Catherine scrambled for another excuse. "Ah, that car. Maybe I misunderstood. Yes, she did own such a car, and she asked me to sell it, which I did." I confronted her, exasperated. "Catherine, why are you lying? I never allowed you to even touch that car, much less sell it." Catherine played the victim. "Sarah, how could you accuse me like this? Are you trying to set me up?" Ignoring her, I played a recorded phone call for the officers, clearly stating that Catherine had no permission to use or sell the car, directly contradicting her claims. The officers, clearly unimpressed by Catherine's attempts to deceive them, sternly asked if she had any more lies to offer. Catherine, now desperate, pleaded, "Please let me explain." The officer cut her off. "You'll have plenty of time to explain at the station. You're under arrest for theft." As the reality of her situation dawned on her, Catherine's demeanor shifted drastically from confidence to fear. Despite her tears and attempts at further deceit, the officers handcuffed her. In a final, desperate plea for leniency, Catherine turned to me. "Sarah, please, you can't let them do this. What will people say?" I stood firm. "Catherine, what you did was illegal. It's not about what people will say. It's about facing the consequences of your actions." Catherine was desperate, her tears failing to move me as she pleaded, "Sarah, it's just a car. Getting me arrested won't solve anything. We can sort this out. You don't want your mother-in-law in jail, do you?" "We're family." "Family," I countered, my resolve unwavering. "You didn't think about family when you decided to sell a piece of our history. Invoking family now is too late." As Catherine was led to the police car, her desperation turned to defiance. "This isn't over, Sarah. I'll get my son involved. He'll set things right." "Good luck," I retorted, knowing Thomas would understand the situation. You should be more concerned about facing the consequences of your actions. Catherine's parting threat was to involve Thomas, believing he would side with her. "He'll rescue me and have you removed from our home," she claimed, a mix of anger and delusion in her voice. However, when Thomas reached out, concerned about the unfolding events, I asked him to meet me at the station, where I intended to file a formal complaint. I was curious to witness Catherine's reaction upon seeing Thomas's response to the situation. At the station, Thomas's arrival only intensified Catherine's emotional display. "Thomas, see what your wife has done. She's put me in jail. You have to help me," she sobbed, hoping for his support. Thomas, seeking clarity, turned to his mother. "Mom, explain what happened with Sarah's car." Catherine, now silent, struggled to justify her actions, realizing any explanation would fall short. Thomas pressed for answers, leading me to outline the entire ordeal. The theft, the sale, the luxurious shopping spree, and the absurd plan for a vacation in Talkeetna. "Mom, what have you done?" Thomas's disbelief was evident. The situation escalated when we learned from the police that the car had been damaged after the sale, potentially leading to a significant lawsuit. Thomas's frustration was palpable. Why couldn't you just leave Sarah's things alone? Catherine, seeking sympathy, implored Thomas to save her from the legal repercussions and the humiliation of jail. But Thomas's stance was firm. "Why should I help, Mom? You brought this on yourself by committing such a senseless act." Catherine's plea for rescue was met with a cold dose of reality from her son. "You should have considered the consequences before acting. I'm standing with Sarah on this." At that moment, it was clear that Thomas saw through his mother's actions and chose to support what was just, marking a significant turning point in how he addressed his mother's manipulative tactics. Catherine's pleas for assistance and forgiveness became more desperate as she realized the gravity of her situation. However, her appeals fell on deaf ears. Her actions had crossed a line that couldn't be overlooked. Thomas was visibly angry and, after expressing his disappointment, chose to leave the station with me. He apologized for his mother's behavior and firmly supported my decision to press charges and seek justice for the wrongful sale and subsequent damage to my Mercedes-Benz SL. It took some time, but I managed to reclaim my car. Unfortunately, it wasn't in the condition I left it. A minor accident had left significant dents. Repairing a Mercedes vehicle isn't cheap, and coupled with legal fees, the financial repercussions for Catherine were severe. She ended up paying a staggering $750,000 to settle the lawsuit, which forced her to sell her childhood home and take on considerable debt. It was a devastating outcome for her, but given the circumstances, she had lost any sympathy from us. Thomas made it abundantly clear that Catherine was no longer welcome in our lives. Her actions had created an insurmountable rift, and he stated that it would be a long time before she could expect any form of communication from us. This decision left Catherine distraught, resulting in yet another public outburst, but her cries no longer had any effect on us. The news of her arrest and the lawsuit spread quickly, alienating her from friends and even family members. It was apparent that her irresponsible and illegal actions had not only legal consequences, but also social ones. Her family was particularly upset, unable to comprehend how she could stoop to stealing and selling items that didn't belong to her. As for me, I eventually received my car back and had it restored to its former glory by a highly skilled master technician. All expenses were, of course, covered by Catherine. The master technician did such a remarkable job that one couldn't tell the car had been previously damaged. While I was reunited with my beloved car, Catherine faced the harsh reality of losing her home and living in a rented apartment, isolated and longing for company. This ordeal solidified our resolve to keep Catherine out of our lives, allowing us to move forward without her negative influence. The lawsuit was settled and justice was served. We could finally close this chaotic chapter and cherish the peace that followed.